A lot of energy in this room. I'm glad to see it. It was a successful day, I hear. You remember me telling you about how what you say matters? Guess what you've already accomplished? TSCA reform already passed. And we're not even halfway through the summit. Imagine what we're going to accomplish by this time tomorrow. Well, I want to thank you so much for your great work today. I really have heard a lot of fantastic comments from the folks who have been up on the Hill. Great response from members of Congress on both sides of the aisle, which is fantastic news, and it points out once again that it doesn't matter what political party you belong to, you believe that manufacturing is important for the future of our country, and it's the lifeblood of our economy. Now, tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to do things a little bit differently. You could just sit there and, eat and have a dry dinner conversation, but we're going to mix it up a little bit. We're going to do something kind of fun. We've got 3 United States senators who are going to be with us this evening, kind of like mini TED Talks. They're going to be coming up and talking to you about what's going on in the world as they see it. And they're going to give unique perspectives on manufacturing challenges and what they're doing to address them. And then they'll take some questions. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to introduce to you our last speaker this evening. And I got to tell you, he's a good friend of mine personally. And I will tell you this, there are 100 extraordinarily talented people in the United States Senate, and they all have many, many attributes. But one attribute that our next speaker has is he is just a genuinely great guy. And we are so fortunate to have him as a friend of manufacturers from the first state, Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. He was elected, please. He was elected in 2010, and he's up for re-election again this year. And I'll tell you something. This is another thing that makes him pretty special. Senator Coons knows a little bit about our industry. He spent 8 years working in the private sector for W.L. Gore and Associates, and he was very active in the National Association of Manufacturers as part of our National Public Affairs Steering Committee. He's a former county executive for Newcastle County, and a graduate of Amherst, Yale Divinity School, and Yale Law School. And in the Senate, he serves on the Approps Committee, Foreign Relations, Judiciary, Small Business and Entrepreneurship, and the Ethics Committee. And when he's not doing that, he's actually commuting every day back home to be with his family. He didn't do this tonight. He didn't do so tonight so he could be here with us. Senator Coons and I just participated on an immigration panel not long ago, and I got to tell you, it's great to see you again, Senator. Come on up and say a few words to our folks here.
Well, good evening, folks. How are you? How's dinner? Now for the positive part of the show. Here's the good news. I'm not up for re-election this year. I appreciate Jay's warm and wonderful introduction. I am grateful for his friendship and for the long engagement I've had with the National Association of Manufacturers. But I was happy to give up an opportunity for dinner at home with my teenagers for the chance to be with you. It's final exam week, and instead of helping my kids cram for their physics and chemistry test tomorrow, I'm here. And I'm just going to start on that point if I could. All of you had to make tough choices to choose to come and spend time in Washington. When I worked for W.L. Gore and Associates, the manufacturer in Newark, Delaware, that Jay referenced, one of my biggest challenges was persuading our senior executives, our operational leaders, the folks who really understood how our company worked and what our needs and issues were, persuading them to take time away from their families and their work to come to Washington, to wait, to stand in line, to go meet with 25 and 27-year-olds who sometimes didn't seem to completely grasp the points they were making. They would come back and growl and say, this wasn't exactly the best use of my time. And when we do things here in Washington that seem perhaps at variance with reality, and not to reinforce your goals and objectives, it is all too easy to throw up your hands and say, we're not making any progress, it doesn't make any difference, I should have gone to the meeting about export growth, I should have gone to the meeting about job skills, I should have gone to the meeting about our IP portfolio, I should have gone and talked to our finance guys. The last thing I should have done is spend a day in Washington. I'm here to say thank you. Thank you for taking the time to welcome senators and congressmen and their staff into your manufacturing facilities, because there are still too many members of Congress who haven't seen modern manufacturing. Please. Thank you for taking the time to come and invest with us. I hope every meeting you had today was positive. I hope you didn't see harried and overworked and overextended senators and congressmen. I hope you got to see chiefs of staff and fully engaged and very bright folks who had a good and positive agenda. But more than anything, the fact that you made the time to be in their office sends a message. You may not appreciate, I certainly didn't before getting in this job, how many other organizations show up early, stay late, camp out on the couch, and do everything they can to get in the heads of members of Congress. And I didn't appreciate at all how few of my colleagues have zero experience with manufacturing. So I have worked hard to find and to build partnerships with members of the Senate and House who either have personal experience or a passion for the issues that will make us competitive and will sustain manufacturing. But your voice, your engagement, and your presence helps sustain that. We could be doom and gloom about the future of America, our place in the world, our economy. I could spend another 5 minutes railing against things that I don't like about the other party, but I don't think that's constructive. And there are very real things to celebrate tonight. For years, I came to Washington on behalf of our little company in Delaware to argue about the R&D tax credit and why it was an important strategic investment for the United States, and it was terrible tax policy to have it expire every 6 months or a year, or 18 months or 2 years, to not be able to predict what it would be and to not be able to make responsible, proactive investments in research. Every year, Monica McGuire would pull together a group of us from companies large and small, and we'd trudge down here and we'd talk to a bunch of barely engaged junior staffers. We'd have to feed them to get them to pay attention. After the food was gone, the tax nerds would stay and the younger staff would leave. Has anything changed in this field? Yes. The R&D tax credit is permanent. That was my very first bill. It is only there because of you. And it's a big deal. Bonus depreciation. If you're buying capital equipment, does bonus depreciation matter? Does Section 179 expensing matter? Does modernizing the R&D tax credit so that it's accessible to a broader range, not just of established and profitable companies, but of early stage and startup companies, do any of these things matter? Yes. And they all got done at the end of last year. A bipartisan bill that I helped lead and develop with Mike Enzi and with Pat Roberts, Republican senators from Wyoming and from Kansas, has modernized the R&D credit so that it's available to early stage and startup companies in their first 5 years. Why? To broaden the companies that participate in the R&D credit so that it's sustainable for the long term. Did something happen earlier tonight, folks? Anything happen in the Senate of the United States earlier tonight? Anybody know anything about this? When Bonnie Lautenberg first called and asked if I would become a co-sponsor of the TSCA reform bill, I said, I'm happy to get involved in the effort. This is a 40-year-old law that is badly broken and really doesn't work. Doesn't work to protect consumers, doesn't work to protect the environment, and certainly doesn't work for the chemical manufacturing community. But I also said there's, bluntly, very little chance this will get done in this bitterly divided and partisan place where you're expecting someone like David Vitter, Tom Udall, and Barbara Boxer, Jim Inhofe, and Ed Markey to hold hands and agree and work something out. I just got to tell you up front, I'm going to work hard, but the odds of success are probably low. Just tonight, comprehensive TSCA reform passed by a close vote, unanimously. Passed unanimously. So there's this guy named Jerry Moran. He's a senator from Kansas. I like him. We work on a couple of different policy bills together that come out of our shared interest and experience. And out of a shared frustration for the different views of our parties about the biggest issues that matter to manufacturers, skilled workforce, immigration, tax and trade issues, intellectual property issues, we decided to form a caucus that would discuss these issues on a regular basis. It's called the Competitiveness Caucus. It has 14 bipartisan members. It's done a dozen substantive events this year. Why does this not get more news? Because in this town, that's considered boring. I'm not on Rachel Maddow, and he's not on whatever the equivalent is on Fox, because working through the issues that matter to you doesn't always galvanize the cable TV crowd and doesn't always get the red meat folks up and running. But laying the groundwork for better intellectual property protection, for the patents and trade secrets that are essential to competitive manufacturing, matters. Figuring out how to do workforce skills and to better organize between K-12 education, apprenticeship programs, and universities and their engineering programs matters. Trying to get it right on immigration so that we've got a reliable workforce for the future matters. All I want to say to you tonight is 3 simple messages. The first would be thank you for your investment of time and energy. The second would be out of that Competitiveness Caucus work and out of an initiative in my caucus called the Manufacturing Jobs for America Initiative, there are a dozen good bills. Manufacturing Universities, a bipartisan bill that incentivizes universities to change their curricula to more explicitly orient towards the needs of manufacturers. The Manufacturing Skills Bill, which explicitly embraces the manufacturing needs and gaps in our city, county, and state training programs at the K-12 and the apprenticeship level. And the Defend Trade Secrets Act, which protects the most important piece of intellectual property that is vital to manufacturers, but didn't have a federal private right of action until 2 weeks ago when President Obama signed the bill that Orrin Hatch and I led through the Senate in a signing ceremony in the Oval Office. We've got sources of division in our country. We've got folks who are frustrated, and we've got folks who demonize, and we've got folks who raise a lot of tough questions. And that's part of a robust and vibrant democracy, and I welcome that. In case Jay didn't mention it in the introduction, I do happen to be a Democrat. But at the end of the day, here's what I know. Manufacturing has provided the best jobs Delawareans have ever had. Manufacturing is the bedrock of America's middle class. Manufacturing has created opportunities for wealth and growth and innovation and an array of services that have changed our world. And every morning when I take the Amtrak train from Wilmington, Delaware to Washington, D.C., I go by a site that haunts me. It's the site of the former Chrysler plant in Newark, Delaware. And when I first ran for office, I'd work those plant gates hard because there were 3,000 high-skilled, high-wage manufacturers working at the Durango plant, which had one of the best labor management relations in the country and one of the best quality assurance programs in auto manufacturing in the world. It's gone today. It's leveled. There's no manufacturing plant there. There is a small one that's making fuel cells, that's growing, but it's 300, not 3,000. As I go past that on the train down in the morning, it haunts me and it pushes me to think about what I can do to reach across the aisle and build meaningful coalitions, to compromise and find a path towards enactment of real bills, and to listen to your questions and concerns and try to find meaningful solutions. When I worked at Gore, we had Democrats, we had Republicans, we had independents, but we frankly spent virtually no time ever talking about politics. We talked about continuous improvement. We talked about integrating supply chains. We talked about competing globally and locally. And we talked about how to attract and retain the absolute best workforce we could from around the world. I would love it if the place I went to work every day had that same spirit of focus on finding a positive future together. So that's why I try to find folks in the Senate, whether it's Joe Donnelly, who ran a small manufacturing plant himself, or it's Ron Johnson, who ran a much larger manufacturing plant. I try every day to respect and reflect the energy that you bring to Washington and the energy that you put out in your communities and in your manufacturing plants week in and week out, year in and year out. I know what you do is hard. I know what you do is important. I just hope to be worthy of the opportunity to legislate on your behalf. So folks, thanks for the invitation tonight. While I will miss having dinner with my kids, I saw them last night and I'll see them tomorrow night, and they knew that of all the invitations I could have gotten in Washington this year, a chance to be with you meant a lot to me. Thank you. Can I take a question too? I'm optimistic somebody's got a good question or two before you go to your dinner and dessert. Please, sir.
Senator, I just want to recognize you and your... thank you. Mike Smaha with Owens, Illinois, glass container manufacturer. To my left is gentleman I just met tonight, Harry from Alcoa. Just want to recognize your work on recycling and sustainability, as both companies use recycled material as part of our feedstock. A lot of manufacturers in this room tonight also do the same thing, and thank you. We really appreciate you telling that story, because manufacturing and sustainability are part of the American renaissance in manufacturing, and I'm not sure that enough folks hear that, especially at the EPA, when they hear about all the sustainability efforts that we are doing on a daily basis at our plants. It's an important story to tell. So thank you very much, Senator. Appreciate it.
Thank you. If I could follow up on that point for just 1 minute, I don't mean to put you to work, but I'm going to put you to work. So when I was at Gore, Dow, DuPont, Ashland, and a number of other companies in our community launched the Delaware Sustainable Chemistry Alliance. That was principally led by former Hercules, now Ashland, for their water-soluble chemistry. But it simply recognized that in the private sector, figuring out ways to do industrial processes that were less expensive, that used less energy, that used less water, that had a lower environmental footprint was about the bottom line. It wasn't about responding to mandates. It was about being more competitive. I've got a bill that we got through the Senate in Tosca, but it got stripped out in the House. I just didn't do my work well enough. Maybe it was the title. Maybe it was someone running for president on my party's ticket that spooked people into thinking this was some mandate, because the phrase was the Sustainable Chemistry Bill. But it was a solid bipartisan bill that reflects it is an industry-led initiative to champion sustainability in industrial processes. I'll get back on the horse and try and figure out a way to get it through both the House and Senate, but if there's folks who are interested in that as a way to make sure that we are using one of the real tools of modern manufacturing, I'd love your assistance. So thank you for the comment. Please.
Hi, my name is Drew Greenblatt. I'm the owner of Marlin Steel in Baltimore, Maryland.
Hey, Drew.
I wanted to thank you for your leadership in pushing through the Defense for Trade Secrets Act. That was a tremendous accomplishment, and we thank you as manufacturers nationwide. Intellectual property is a massive problem with us. We're getting a lot of critical, creative ideas stolen from us. That's our secret sauce. We need help from the federal government. So this is a big win with defense trade. That's fabulous, thank you. What's the next thing that's viable that we could get across the finish line in this divided partisan Washington?
Great question, and thank you. It came out of personal experiences that were difficult, where we saw absolutely vital elements of our manufacturing process that separated us from our competitors walk out the door. And we were unable to protect ourselves as a company from that. And having now a federal private right of action, I think, significantly expands the opportunities. But it's still defensive. It's not offensive, right? It's after the trade secrets are stolen, you're trying to minimize and contain the damage. You asked for something that's possible and that's bite-sized and that's near-term. I'll suggest IPEC, the Intellectual Property Enforcement Coordinator. As a concept, having an office that pulls together all the different IP enforcement efforts across several different federal agencies and offices, I think is a good idea. I think our federal government has failed to prioritize IP enforcement and protection at a high enough level. when we're negotiating with, I don't know, hypothetically, the Chinese. Military and strategic issues tend to always eclipse IP issues, although they're on the agenda. The IPEC needs permanent funding, permanent staff. It needs to not be a temporary small office that has a handful of DTLEs from other places within government. And I'm looking for partners for a bill that could help strengthen it and make it more effective for the long term. That's a small piece. There are bigger things we can do in patent law that I'm excited about working on in the next Congress to make sure that we are genuinely dealing with what I will call real patent trolls, folks who are sending crap demand letters while protecting the patent rights of those who invent new materials. I'm very worried about some of the efforts at sweeping patent reform that I think would do unintended harm to manufacturers and to those companies that are in materials businesses. So that's an attempt at a small and a large. Good news, bad news. Jay's standing there because he wants me to stop talking so you can enjoy your dinner. I think you just saw how much I enjoy being with you and taking your questions. I'd stay all night, but you've got a dinner to enjoy. Thank you. I really appreciate the chance to be with you.
Thanks, Jay. I know you got work to do. No, it's really good.
Good to be with you. Appreciate it.
So I have a small story about Senator Coons. He was talking about the Amtrak train he takes every day. When he first came to the Senate, and this is what you want to see in an elected official, and he really cares about the issues that your trade association works on. He called me from Amtrak, and Amtrak had not quite perfected the seamless integration of cell towers. So there was this crackling, Jay, this is Chris Coons, and I want to talk to you about my gone. Get a call back, manufacturing agenda, and here's the items. And anyway, we went through about 10 versions of that, but we finally got the call completed. And I want to thank you, Senator, for your great commitment to the manufacturing economy, for thinking outside the box and really caring about what manufacturers think. You are a great champion for us in the United States Senate. So you just heard from three great, very passionate public officials, the kind of people that you want to see serving us in the United States Congress and the United States Senate. And we were so grateful to have them with us here today. As you talk to folks during your remaining meetings tomorrow, share your thoughts, share your enthusiasm, tell your stories. I want to remind you to tell those stories. We're going to be back here tomorrow morning for breakfast. I'm going to turn it over to Tiffany Adams to give you the logistics about tomorrow. But again, just one final word of thank you for a great day today. We made progress. We'll continue to make progress tomorrow. Tiffany, come on up.